Creating a graph in Google Docs. Normally when you create a graph, you would select the data that you wanted to graph and then insert your chart. But in the case of a Google Doc, what you need to do first is put your cursor where you want the chart to be and go up to Insert and Chart, and then choose the kind of chart. Now remember, the kind of chart you choose is based on your data. Is it a percent of a whole? Is it something that changes over time? Or in my case, it's separate incidents, so I would choose a column chart. So what it does is create a column chart or a chart of your choosing that has generic data in it. So if you select the chart one time, in the upper right-hand corner, this little triangle shows up. And if you hold that triangle down, it says Open Source. So what it will do is open up a spreadsheet that is linked to this document, and it has that generic data in there. Now obviously this isn't from my experiment, so I would need to go and put the right data in there. So what I'm going to do is go back to my doc, and I'm going to copy and paste the information that I need for my chart. I'm going to go and select all of this and copy it, and then go back to the spreadsheet. I'm going to click in the first cell and I'm going to paste. Now when I pasted that in, it left this first row, which is not my information. That came from the generic data. So I'm going to select that first row and do a two-finger click and delete that row. And then I can, if this is in the way, I can move this chart down a little bit so that I can see my information better. So at this point, the chart here is kind of guessing what I want to graph. So what I need to do is refine this a little bit more, add some titles, things like that. Now to do that, the three little dots in the corner of the graph, now if you can't see this, you make sure you select the graph, and the three little dots in the corner say Edit Chart at the top. So you're going to choose Edit Chart, and then this box will appear on the side. This box has two tabs, Data and Customize. Data is you telling the computer what specifically you want to graph. The Customize is more like the titles and those kinds of things. So first of all, the chart type is a column chart, so if I wanted to change my mind on the kind of chart, I could do that here. The range, it says it is graphing from A1 to C991. Now, I know that's not as accurate as it should be. So A1 is fine, but all of my data could only possibly go to H8. So if I change that to H8, I'm just clicking there and typing, then it's going to more closely reflect this data. Now then I need to determine what am I trying to show, and do I need to include all of these things. So in my case, I wanted to show, based on the oil that was put on the lanes, how would people's scores change in bowling. So in this case, I have the names down here as well as the weekly average. Or I could switch it so the lanes are down here and the names are over here. How would I do that? If I scroll down, there is a switch rows and columns. And when I do that, you'll notice that now the lanes are down here and the names are over here. So again, you can choose which one is best for what you're doing. Now in my case, it doesn't make sense to have a weekly average in here. So I don't really want to graph that. So if I go to each one of these, I can determine, should this be in here, shouldn't it? So weekly average I don't want. So I'm going to go to the three dots and I'm going to say remove. And that's going to take that off of the list. Okay. I could also go to each one of these if there's something I wanted to change. For example, William, if I go to William and edit, it says it's going from A2, which is where William's name is, all the way over to H2. Well, if I didn't want to include high game in this because it didn't make sense for my results, I could actually go into this box and change this to say G2. And when it changed it for William, it wouldn't show. William's light blue doesn't show on here. Now, if I needed to do that for each one, if it was something that was reflecting each one, I would actually need to do that one at a time on here. Now what is on the x-axis is up here. So it says x-axis, and that's where you can tell the computer what you want. So if this was not showing the correct information, you could actually go in here and put the correct information in here. In my case, I'm just going to take off that high game. Right, so this is looking like I want it to look, except it's missing its labels. So I'm going to go over to Customize, and I'm going to look at these different choices that I have here. So here are some things I can change with the way this looks. Chart and axis title. So the title is points scored, which is not a descriptive title. So the title that you put on here should tell the person exactly what you did for your experiment. So this should be very reflective of what you did. If I go to chart title, I could add a subtitle if I need to, but horizontal axis title, so that's this X title here. So again, a descriptive word about what that represents. So if you have names down there, please don't put people, because that doesn't tell us anything. Are they students? Are they bowlers? Who are those people? Right? In my case, this is oil patterns. The vertical axis over here, these are bowling scores. Now in my case, this works out well because the 300 is a maximum score someone can get in bowling, so that's what this should be. This should reflect what the data is, so or could be. For example, if you gave a 10-point quiz, this should start at 0 and should be 10 at the top. As far as the series are concerned, these are all of the series that we have here. We have one for each particular person. So if you notice on this one, I selected data labels, and on this it doesn't make sense because it's just a jumbled mess. But in some cases, it might be helpful for you to put the data labels on so that if you could read this a little bit better. So for example, in my case, another graph, if I have to make a second graph, the second graph I might make is the average of the score for each oil pattern for the lane. So my second graph could be these averages, and then for that one I could put data labels on. That wouldn't be a problem on there. If I chose one particular series, for example William, and I wanted to change the color on that particular bar, I could do that. So if I wanted William to be red instead, I could do that. Now the legend, some people call that the key, is here, and your legend you get to choose things like where it's located. So do you want it along the right hand side, or would you like it at the top? So those are some choices you can make with that. Other things with all of these axis titles and the legend is looking at your font too. Depending upon if you're putting this on your dock, it can be smaller, but if you're putting this on something that is like full page size and you're going to put it on your display board, you're probably going to want these to be larger so that people can see them a little bit better. I'll just point here as far as the horizontal axis. Again, you can change the text and the size and those kinds of things. You can also change, for example, if these were really long and you needed them to slant, you could change that here by a certain percentage. And the vertical axis, this is where you can change the value. So if this would have only gone to 250 instead of 300, which it would be inaccurate because the bowling score goes up to 300, I could change this maximum value to 300 in here, and it would change my graph. Grid lines just add lines to this. In my case, there are some grid lines here. I don't need any more. I'm going to go back to the Google Doc, and it still shows my same old graph that I have here, but if I choose the update, it's going to reflect that graph that I created and add that to here. What's neat about this is I can always go back to that chart, whether I go to the open source or go back to that if it's already open. If I make changes in here, I can always update it in my Google Doc. So that's kind of nice in that way.